The Volrath Empire had conquered 47 species across the galaxy. They were 8 feet tall, with hard shells covering their bodies and claws that could cut through metal. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever tried. When they turned their eyes toward human space, they expected another easy victory. Station Horizon floated at the edge of the Kira Nebula. It was a mining station, not a military base. 3,400 people lived there. They mined rocks from asteroids and sent metals back to Earth. It was boring work, but it was honest work. Families lived there. Children went to school there. People fell in love and grew old there. Tejo was one of those people. He was 34 years old and worked as a maintenance engineer. His job was to fix broken pipes and patch holes in the station walls. He was not tall or strong. He did not know how to fight. He was quiet and liked to read books about machines. His wife was named Jian. She worked in the station's medical center. She had a warm smile and laughed easily. They had been married for 9 years. Their daughter was named Hana. She had just turned 7 years old. She liked to follow her father around and ask questions about how things worked. She wanted to be an engineer like him when she grew up. On the day the Volrath came, Tejo was deep inside the station fixing a water recycler. He heard the alarms start screaming. He heard explosions shake the walls. He tried to run back to his family, but the corridors were already filling with smoke and fire. Commander Yuna led the station's small defense force against the attackers. She was brave. Her soldiers were brave. But they had old weapons and no real training for war. The Volrath cut through them like they were made of paper. The attack lasted 6 hours. Tejo spent most of that time trying to reach his home. But every path was blocked by fire or collapsed metal or Volrath soldiers. He could hear screaming all around him. He could hear the sounds of weapons firing. He could hear people dying. The evacuation shuttles tried to escape. The Volrath shot them down one by one. Tejo watched through a window as the last shuttle exploded in a ball of orange flame. There would be no escape. When the Volrath started going through the station room by room, killing anyone they found, Tejo did the only thing he could think of. He climbed inside a sewage processing tank and sealed the hatch behind him. He stayed there for 11 hours. The smell was terrible. The space was small and dark. But the worst part was the sounds. He could hear footsteps above him. Heavy Volrath footsteps. He could hear doors being forced open. He could hear people begging. He could hear the begging stop. He pressed his hands over his ears, but he could still hear everything. When the sounds finally stopped, Tejo waited another 3 hours before he came out. The station was silent now. Emergency lights painted everything in red. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burned metal. He walked through the corridors like a ghost. Bodies lay everywhere. Human bodies. His neighbors. His co-workers. His friends. The Volrath had not just killed them. They had made sure it hurt first. Tejo found Jian in the medical center. She had died trying to protect the patients there. Her body was cold when he held her. He found Hana under a table in their home. She had been hiding there when they found her. She was still holding the small toy robot Tejo had built for her birthday. Something broke inside him then. He sat on the floor of his home with his daughter in his arms, and he screamed. He screamed until his voice was gone. He screamed until he could not breathe. He screamed until there was nothing left inside him but emptiness. The Volrath were long gone by then. They had left the station floating in space as a warning to other human colonies. Look what happens when you resist us. Look what happens when you stand in our way. They did not bother to check if everyone was dead. Why would they? They had killed thousands. 1 or 2 survivors would not matter. Humans were weak. Humans were soft. Humans were nothing. That was their first mistake. Taiho sat alone in the ruined station surrounded by the dead. He had no weapons. He had no ship. He had no army. He had nothing but his grief and his knowledge of machines. But he also had something the Velrith did not expect. He had time, and he had a reason to use it. In the silence of Station Horizon, surrounded by everyone he had ever loved, Taiho made a promise. He did not make it out loud. He did not need to. He made it in his heart. In the dark place where his love for his family had lived, the Velrith would learn what it meant to leave a human alive. They would learn what one man could do when he had nothing left to lose. They would learn that some things should not be left broken, because broken things can be fixed, and fixed things can be made stronger than before. Outside, the nebula glowed with soft purple light. The stars watched in silence. The universe kept spinning as it always did, but something had changed. Something small, something quiet, something dangerous. For the first 3 days, Taiho did nothing but take care of the dead. He could not bury them. There was no ground on a space station, so he wrapped each body in emergency blankets. Silver blankets meant to keep people warm in emergencies. Now they were funeral shrouds. He carried each body to Cargo Bay 4, one by one, hour after hour. He did not count how many there were. He did not want to know the number. He wrapped Jine in the softest blanket he could find. He wrapped Hana in 2 blankets to keep her warm, even though he knew she could not feel cold anymore. He placed the toy robot in her hands before he sealed the cargo bay door. Then he sat in front of that door and cried. He cried for 2 days. He did not eat. He barely drank water. His body shook with grief until it had nothing left to shake with. He thought about joining his family. It would be easy. Just open an airlock. Just stop breathing. Just let go. But on the 4th day, something changed inside him. He woke up and the sadness was still there. But now there was something else too. Something hard and cold. Something that felt like iron in his chest. Anger that the Velrith had done this. The Velrith had killed everyone. The Velrith were still out there, doing the same thing to other families, other stations, other worlds, and they thought they had won. Taiho stood up. His legs were weak from not eating. His throat was dry from crying. But his mind was clear for the first time in days. He was an engineer. He fixed things. He built things. He understood how machines worked. It was time to get to work. The Velrith had left behind wreckage from their attack. Broken assault craft floated outside the station. Damaged weapons lay in the corridors. Communication equipment sparked and beeped on the floor. Taiho collected everything. He dragged pieces of Velrith technology to his workshop. He studied them like a student studying for the most important test of his life. The Velrith built good machines. Strong machines. But they also built arrogant machines. Their shield systems all used the same frequency. Their communication signals were barely encrypted. They had never needed to hide their messages because no one had ever been strong enough to intercept them. That was their second mistake. Within a week, Taiho understood how their shields worked. Within 2 weeks, he could listen to their communications. Within a month, he had repaired one of their damaged fighters and made it fly again. He started small. He listened to their patrol routes. He mapped their supply lines. He learned when they were strong and when they were weak. He was patient. He had nothing but time. His first attack was on a supply ship. It was carrying food to a Velrith outpost. 4 Velrith soldiers were on board. They were not expecting trouble. Why would they? Humans were beaten. Humans were harmless. Taiho disabled their engines with a modified mining laser. The supply ship drifted helplessly in space. He flew his stolen fighter close and attached to their airlock. When the door opened, the 4 Velrith laughed. They saw a small human in a dirty maintenance suit. He was thin and weak-looking. His hands were covered in grease. He did not even have a weapon. One of them stepped forward, raising his claws. Taiho stepped back into the airlock and sealed the door behind him. Then he opened the outer door of the supply ship. The atmosphere rushed out into space. The Velrith tried to hold on to something, anything, but there was nothing to hold. Their bodies were pulled toward the open door. Their lungs burned as the air left them. Their eyes went wide with surprise and then with fear. Taiho watched through the small window of the airlock. He watched until they stopped moving. Then he closed the outer door, filled the ship with air again, and took everything useful. He did not feel happy. He did not feel satisfied. He felt nothing at all, but he kept going. His second attack was on a communications relay. He destroyed it with explosives made from mining equipment. The Velrith lost contact with 3 outposts for a week. His third attack was on a fuel depot. He waited until a storm of solar radiation made their sensors useless. Then he flew in close and planted bombs on their fuel tanks. The explosion could be seen from 3 systems away. The Velrith started hearing stories. Strange stories. Stories about a ghost that attacked without warning. A ghost that killed without mercy. A ghost that could not be caught or found or stopped. They did not believe the stories at first. How could one human cause so much trouble? It was impossible, but the attacks kept coming. Month after month. Ship after ship. Base after base. The ghost was real. And the ghost was angry. Taiho worked alone for almost a year. He slept in his stolen ship. He ate Velrith food that tasted like metal and dirt. He spent his days planning and his nights remembering. He talked to Jian sometimes, even though she was not there. He told her about his plans. He asked her for advice. He imagined what she would say if she could see him now. She would be worried, he knew. She would tell him to be careful. She would tell him that revenge would not bring them back. He knew she was right. But he could not stop. Not yet. Not until the Velrith understood what they had done. Not until they felt even a small piece of the pain they had caused. The ghost kept hunting. The ghost kept killing. The ghost kept learning. And somewhere in Velrith High Command, officers started to worry. One human should not be able to do this. One human should not be this dangerous. One human should not make an empire afraid. A Taiho was not just any human. He was a broken human. A fixed human. A human with nothing left to lose and everything left to give. The Velrith would learn this lesson soon enough. 2 years passed. Taiho was no longer alone. It started with Mireille. She had been a combat medic on a hospital ship. The Velrith had burned her ship because it was helping wounded soldiers from a battle they had won. They did not need prisoners. They did not want survivors. So they set the ship on fire and watched it burn. Mireille had escaped in a small pod. She drifted in space for 3 weeks before Taiho found her signal. When he opened her pod, she was barely alive. He nursed her back to health with stolen Velrith medical supplies. When she was strong enough to talk, she asked him one question. "Are you the ghost?" He nodded. "Good," she said. "I want to help." After Miri came Dong Yun. The Velrith had captured him during a raid on a colony. They wanted information about human military bases. Dong Yun did not know anything useful. He was just a farmer. But the Velrith did not believe him. They tortured him for weeks. They cut off both his arms to make him talk. When he still had nothing to say, they threw him away like garbage. Taiho found him on a prison transport ship. He was supposed to be dead, but Dong Yun was too stubborn to die. Taiho brought him back to his hidden base. He built new arms for him from Velrith machine parts. Arms that were stronger than human arms. Arms that could crush Velrith armor like paper. Dong Yun became Taiho's chief tactician. He could not fight in the front lines anymore, but his mind was sharp. He studied Velrith military strategy. He found weaknesses that no one else could see. He planned attacks that should have been impossible. More survivors came. Escaped prisoners. Refugees from destroyed colonies. Aliens from species the Velrith had conquered long ago. They came looking for the ghost. They came looking for hope. Teho gave them something to believe in. They called themselves the Silent Tide. They struck without warning and disappeared before anyone could catch them. They did not fight fair. They did not follow rules of war. They did what they had to do to survive and to hurt their enemy. They attacked supply lines. Without supplies, Velrith outposts began to starve. They destroyed communication relays. Without communications, Velrith commanders could not coordinate their forces. They sabotaged fuel depots. Without fuel, Velrith ships could not move. The Silent Tide never attacked military bases directly. They were too small for that. But they did not need to. They simply made it impossible for those bases to function. The Velrith High Command grew frustrated. How could a small group of rebels cause so much damage? They sent patrols to hunt them down. The patrols never returned. They set traps to catch them. The traps were turned against them. They offered rewards for information. No one talked. Finally, they sent Admiral Vorith. Vorith was the most decorated commander in the Velrith military. He had led the conquest of 12 species. He had never lost a battle. He was ruthless and clever and completely without mercy. He was also the officer who had commanded the attack on Station Horizon. Teho had been waiting for this. Vorith brought a fleet of 50 warships into the Kira Nebula. He was confident, arrogant even. He announced his presence on all channels, daring the rebels to face him. "I destroyed your pathetic station," he broadcast. "I killed your weak families. Now I will destroy you too. Come out and fight, or hide like the cowards you are." Teho listened to the message in silence. Myray watched his face. She saw no anger there, no fear. Just cold, patient calculation. "What do we do?" she asked. "We give him what he wants," Teho said. A fight. For 6 months, Teho had been preparing. He had seeded the nebula with explosives. Hundreds of them. Thousands. He had hidden them in the ionized gas where Velrith sensors could not detect them. He had connected them to a single trigger in his hand. Varith's fleet entered the nebula in perfect formation. They moved slowly, carefully, scanning for threats. They found nothing. The nebula seemed empty. Then Teho pressed the trigger. The explosions came from everywhere at once. Ships that had been flying safely suddenly found themselves surrounded by fire. Shields that should have protected them failed because Teho had designed the bombs to hit their exact frequency. Engines that should have carried them to safety were torn apart before they could activate. 20 ships were destroyed in the first minute. 15 more in the next 5 minutes. The rest scattered in panic, crashing into each other, flying into more hidden bombs. When the fire and smoke cleared, only Vorith's flagship remained. Teho flew toward it in his small ship. The flagship was damaged and drifting. Its weapons were offline. Its shields were gone. It was helpless. He docked with the flagship and walked inside. Velrith's soldiers tried to stop him. They failed. Myray and Donghyun were with him now, and they had learned how to fight Velrith. Teho walked to the bridge. He stepped over bodies. He pushed through broken doors. He did not hurry. He had waited 2 years for this moment. He could wait a few more minutes. Varith was on the bridge, standing by his command chair. He was old for a Vorith, his shell cracked and gray. But he stood straight and proud. He would not beg. "You are the ghost," Vorith said. It was not a question. "I am Teho," he replied. I fixed water recyclers on Station Horizon. You probably do not remember. Varath looked at him with something that might have been curiosity. I have destroyed many stations. They all look the same. Do you remember a little girl named Hana? Taiho asked. His voice was quiet, calm, terrifying. Varath thought for a moment. Then he shook his head. I do not remember any human children. They are not important. Taiho nodded slowly. She was important to me. He raised his weapon. She was everything to me. Varath died looking into the eyes of a man he had never thought twice about. A maintenance worker. A nobody. A human. Taiho left the flagship burning behind him. He did not look back. The galaxy would hear about this. The Velrith would hear about this. Everyone would know that the ghost was real, and Taiho was just getting started. The news of Admiral Varath's death spread across the galaxy like fire. For 300 years, the Velrith had seemed unbeatable. They had crushed every enemy. They had conquered every world they wanted. They had never known defeat. Now they knew fear. The silent tide grew faster than ever before. Ships came from every corner of human space. Soldiers who had been hiding came out of hiding. Scientists who had been afraid offered their knowledge. Pilots who had given up hope found it again. But it was not just humans who came. The Korath were a snake-like species with scales of green and gold. The Velrith had enslaved them 200 years ago. They had been forced to work in factories, building weapons for their masters. They had been told they were weak, that they could never be free. When they heard about Varath's death, they rose up. They killed their guards with tools meant for building. They took the weapons they had made and turned them against the Velrith. Within 1 month, 3 Karth worlds were free. The Thali were small creatures with 4 arms and large eyes. The Velrith used them as miners because they could work in tight spaces. Thousands of Thali died every year in Velrith mines. No one cared. They were just tools to be used and thrown away. When they heard about Varath's death, they stopped working. They blocked tunnels. They destroyed equipment. They made the mines worthless. Without those mines, the Velrith lost half their metal supply. The Varan were tall and thin with skin like polished stone. They had once been great warriors, but the Velrith had broken them. They had been turned into servants, forced to bow and clean and serve food to their conquerors. When they heard about Varath's death, they remembered who they used to be. They found their old weapons. They remembered their old training. They joined the fight. Taiho did not ask to lead all these people. He did not want to be a symbol or a hero. He just wanted to hurt the Velrith. But sometimes history chooses people whether they want to be chosen or not. The Velrith Emperor was named Vector. He had ruled for 500 years. His full title was Vector the Undying, because no one had ever been able to kill him. He sat in his palace on Velrith Prime and watched his empire shake. He was angry. He was confused. He could not understand how this had happened. One human, he said to his advisors. One human started all this. Find him. Bring him to me alive. I will show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge us. He offered a reward for Taiho's capture. The amount was huge. Enough to buy a whole planet. Enough to make someone rich for 1,000 lifetimes. Hunters came from everywhere. Some were Velrith soldiers hoping for glory. Some were criminals hoping for money. Some were aliens who had no loyalty to anyone and would do anything for the right price. Most of them never came back. Taiho had learned too much in the past 2 years. He knew how hunters thought. He knew how they searched. He knew their tricks and their traps and their weapons. He had survived alone in hostile space for a year. A few bounty hunters were not going to catch him. The hunters who did come back told stories. Terrible stories. Stories about a human who seemed to know everything before it happened. A human who could disappear in the middle of a fight. A human who showed no fear and no mercy. Some said he was not human at all. Some said he was a demon. Some said he was a ghost made of pure hatred. Taeho did not care what they said. He had work to do. Mira watched him carefully during these months. She had known Taeho before the fall of Station Horizon. She remembered him as a quiet man who smiled often and laughed easily. A man who loved his wife and daughter more than anything in the universe. That man was gone. In his place was something harder. Something colder. Something that never rested and never smiled and never forgot. One night, after a successful attack on a Velrith communication hub, Mira sat down next to him. "You need to sleep," she said. "I am fine," he replied without looking at her. "You have not slept in 3 days. There is too much to do." Mira was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been afraid to ask for a long time. "When this is over, what will you do?" Taeho stopped what he was working on. His hands went still. His eyes stared at nothing. "I do not know," he said finally. His voice was strange, empty. "I have not thought about that." "You should think about it," Mira said gently. "Revenge is not a life. It is just a task. When the task is done, you need something else." Taeho looked at her. For just a moment, she saw something behind his cold eyes. Something broken? Something sad. Something that remembered what it felt like to be happy. Then it was gone, hidden behind the mask again. "First we win," he said. "Then I will think about what comes next." Mira nodded. She did not push further. She knew that some wounds could not be healed with words. They needed time. They needed peace. They needed something worth living for. She hoped Taeho would find that something before the war was over. Before it was too late. Because she had seen what happened to people who had nothing left after their fight was done. She had seen them fade away. She had seen them give up. She had seen them die of broken hearts even when their bodies were still alive. She did not want that for Taeho. He deserved better. He had earned better. But that was a problem for later. Right now, there was a war to win, and they were winning. The Velrith Empire was cracking. Its soldiers were tired. Its resources were running low. Its conquered peoples were rising up everywhere. The end was coming. Everyone could feel it. The only question was what would be left when it was over. The final battle came 3 years after the fall of Station Horizon. Taeho stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at Velrith Prime through the window. The planet was beautiful in a cold way. Gray clouds covered most of it. Huge cities spread across its surface like metal scars. Millions of Velrith lived there. Millions more slaves worked beneath them. Around the planet hung the orbital defense platforms. Massive weapons that could destroy whole fleets. Any ship that came close would be turned to dust in seconds. No one had ever attacked Velrith Prime. No one had ever been crazy enough to try. Taeho was crazy enough. Behind him was the largest fleet ever gathered against the Velrith. Human ships, Korith ships, Thali ships, Maren ships. 12 species united against their common enemy. They had all lost something to the Velrith. They had all come to take it back. But Taeho knew that even this fleet was not enough. The orbital platforms were too strong. They would be destroyed before they got close. So he did not plan to attack the platforms. He planned to turn them off. Deep beneath the surface of Velrith Prime was a massive geothermal power plant. It provided energy for the whole planet, including the orbital platforms. If that power plant stopped working, the platforms would go dark. Taeho had studied the plant for months. He had stolen blueprints. He had bribed workers. He had learned every tunnel and every pipe and every wire. He knew how to break it. The plan was simple but dangerous. A small team would land on the planet in secret. They would enter the old maintenance tunnels that the Volrath had forgotten about. They would reach the power plant and cause a cascade failure. Not an explosion. Not destruction. Just a shutdown. 17 minutes of darkness. 17 minutes would be enough. Taiho led the team himself. Mai Rei was with him. Dongyun was with him. 12 volunteers came too. They all knew they might not come back. They came anyway. They landed on the night side of the planet in a small ship designed to look like garbage. The Velrith did not scan garbage carefully. Why would they? Who would hide in garbage? The tunnels were dark and wet and smelled like chemicals. They had been built 100 years ago and then forgotten. Slaves had maintained them once, but those slaves were gone now. No one came here anymore. The team moved quietly through the darkness. Their footsteps echoed in the empty tunnels. Water dripped from the ceiling. Strange creatures scurried away from their lights. They reached the power plant after 4 hours of walking. The main reactor was a huge machine that glowed with orange light. It pulled heat from the planet's core and turned it into electricity. The sound it made was like a constant heartbeat, deep and slow. Tae-ho studied the controls. He had memorized the plans, but seeing the real thing was different. The controls were in Velrath language. The buttons were sized for Velrath hands. Everything was built for people bigger and stronger than humans. But Taiho was an engineer. He understood machines. And machines were the same in any language. He worked quickly. He adjusted settings. He rerouted power. He created feedback loops that would grow and grow until the safety systems had no choice but to shut everything down. How long? Mai asked. 3 minutes until cascade begins, Taiho said. Then another 4 minutes until full shutdown. We need to be out of here before then. They ran. Behind them, the reactors started to make strange noises. Warning lights flashed. Alarms screamed. The heartbeat became irregular, skipping beats. Growing faster. Above them, in orbit, the defense platforms began to flicker. The coalition fleet saw their chance. Every ship moved forward at once. The platforms fired, but their shots were weak and slow. More shots missed than hit. The fleet pushed through. When the platforms finally went dark, the fleet was already past them. The battle for Velrath Prime lasted 6 hours. The Volrath military fought hard, but they had been weakened by years of rebellion. Their best ships were gone. Their best commanders were dead. Their soldiers were tired and afraid. The coalition fleet was tired too. But they were angry. And anger was stronger than fear. By morning, the Volrath had surrendered. Taiho did not fight in the space battle. He had another destination. The Emperor's palace was in the center of the largest city. It was built from the bones of conquered species, a monument to Volrath cruelty. Vector the Undying sat in his throne room, waiting. He could have run. He could have hidden. But he was too proud for that. He had ruled for 500 years. He would not die running like a coward. Taiho walked into the throne room alone. His maintenance suit was torn and dirty. His face was tired. He looked like nothing special, but his eyes were steady. His hands did not shake. Vek looked at him from his throne. The Emperor was ancient, his shell cracked and gray, his movements slow. But his eyes were still sharp. You are the one, Vector said. The ghost. The human who broke my empire. I am Taiho, he replied. I fixed pipes on a space station you destroyed. You probably do not remember. I remember nothing about humans, Vector said. You are all the same. Small, weak, forgettable. You killed everyone I loved, Taiho said quietly. My wife, my daughter. 3,400 people on Station Horizon. You left me alive because you thought I did not matter. He stepped closer to the throne. You should have made sure I was dead. Vector stared at him. For the first time in 500 years, something that might have been regret flickered across his face. One human, he whispered. How did one human do this? Taiho thought about Jian, who had always believed in him. He thought about Hannah, who had wanted to be like her father. You gave me nothing left to lose, he said, and everything left to fight for. The war ended that day. The Velrith Empire signed complete surrender. The conquered species were freed. Slaves walked out of mines and factories into sunlight for the first time in their lives. Children born in chains would grow up free. Taiho did not stay for the celebrations. He returned to Station Horizon. The wreckage still drifted in the nebula after all these years. Broken and empty. A tomb floating in space. He opened Cargo Bay 4 for the first time since he had sealed it. The silver blankets were still there. Still and silent and cold, Myre found him sitting among them. He was holding 2 small bundles wrapped in emergency blankets. His face was wet with tears. She sat down beside him. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say. Outside, the nebula glowed purple. The same stars shone that Hannah had once asked her father to name for her. Taiho began to speak those names. Silly names he had made up years ago. Names like Bunny Star and Princess Light and Hannah's favorite. He spoke them into the silence, one by one. Gifts for a little girl who would never hear them. The war was over. The enemy was beaten. The galaxy was healing, but some wounds never fully heal. Some losses can never be replaced. Some prices are too high, even for victory. Taiho stayed in the cargo bay until the stars faded and morning came. Then he stood up slowly. What now? Marie asked. He looked at her. His eyes were still sad. They would always be sad. But somewhere behind the sadness, she saw something new. Something that looked almost like peace. I do not know, he said. But I think I want to find out. They walked out of the cargo bay together. Behind them, the silver blankets caught the starlight and glowed like tiny moons. The ghost was finally ready to rest. The universe kept spinning. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between stars, a maintenance worker's love for his family had changed everything.